Joining us right now is former Deputy Chief of Staff to President George W. Bush, Fox News contributor Karl Rove. Karl, good to see you, sir. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good morning.
So the author of this book, Michael Wolff, reportedly spent hours at a time in private areas of the West Wing. He was in the office of then Chief of Staff Reince Priebus. He had unlimited access, apparently. Your reaction as former Chief of Staff yourself?
Shocked. Why would you allow this to happen? You don't need to have the press floating around the West Wing. He was given a special pass to get in. He spent large numbers of hours there, at least 20 different visits to the West Wing, hours at a time, and allowed in areas that really the press shouldn't be allowed in. There's no reason for a reporter to be sitting in the office of the senior advisor or the chief of staff for large amounts of time for a book. In the first year, you may need to have somebody come and interview you in the office for a newspaper story or a news magazine article, but a book, there is nothing good that can come from that.
So by the way, do we know if Steve Bannon said this while he was still at the White House? Because, I mean, it takes a while to publish a book.
Absolutely.
So he was saying this while Michael Wolff had all this access, while he was working there.
Right, absolutely, and he's not denied it. In fact, he affirmed that these things were there. Wolff apparently has tapes of a lot of these. I could see Bannon being so egotistical that he'd love to be memorialized on tape.
Wow.
These things sound like him. It's you remember that famous picture from the Vietnam War of the Buddhist monk who poured gasoline on himself and then immolated himself? Well, this is what Steve Bannon has done to himself in a narcissistic, egotistical, arrogant burst of self-interest.
Seems that way, Jason.
Does that mean he can't be trusted then? Because you're the second person that came on today to say this is a Steve Bannon-like comment. This is the way he is.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Look, remember, this is the guy who, when he was fired from the White House, walked out and said on the record, the Trump presidency as we know it is effectively ended. In other words, I'm the motive power behind this president. Right. I'm the puppet master and he's the puppet. I'm now departing, and so it's all over. And ironically, he then went out and attempted to depict himself as the sort of the brand of Trump. When it came to elections, he was going to pick candidates who would represent the Donald Trump brand and overthrow the Republican Party as it now exists and replace it with his own image of a nationalistic, populistic party. And, we got Roy Moore, we got Kelly Ward, we got Danny Tarkanian, all these candidates whom he sort of embraced or recruited and threw into the race. All of them are now going to have to be asked the tough question of, do you agree with his criticisms of the president and the president's son and the president's son-in-law and the president's daughter? Is this the guy that you really want to have supporting you and backing you? Do you embrace him like he's embraced you?
Right.
Carl, hey, Jason Chaffetz here. So if you're in the Democrat end of the spectrum, how are you going to use this and exploit it to make hay for make trouble for the Republicans in 2018?
Well, I think they're going to focus less on Bannon and more on the ugly things that are said in this book about President Trump. And look, there's a limit to what, if you don't like President Trump, there's plenty in there for you to not like in this book. But that's not what, in my opinion, is going to determine the outcome of the election. The outcome of the election is going to be whether the Republicans can have an affirmative vision of what it is they want to achieve, and do the Democrats either just spend themselves in resistance, here's how bad Donald Trump is, or do they finally wake up and realize that in order to maximize their gains in a midterm, they've got to have an alternative vision of what they want to do that is optimistic and positive and compelling for the average American. The hope I've got is that they continue down this path of mindless resistance where the only argument they have is we hate Donald Trump and we want to impeach Donald Trump, we want to curtail Donald Trump, we want to remove Donald Trump, and that ain't enough to maximize the kind of results they could have in the 2018 election.
Well, Carl, looking back at Steve Bannon, this hurts Steve Bannon even more than it hurts the Trump presidency.
Oh, absolutely.
In the way that Bannon got behind Roy Moore, bad candidate to begin with. Roy Moore loses in a state that a Republican should never, ever lose in.
Right.
Then Bannon's trying to tear down the Republican Party. The Republicans join arms and pass a tax reform law that's going to benefit the vast majority of Americans.
Yeah, and remember, Bannon, in the White House discussions about tax reform, was an advocate for raising the top rate, and the Republicans lowered the top rate, albeit modestly. He was for a much more populist, less growth-centered, less supply-side oriented tax cut. But look, he's effectively dead as a political figure. When he left the White House, he publicly said, "I'm going to replace the establishment of the Republican Party. Mitch McConnell, you're dead. I'm taking your donors. I'm taking the control of these primaries. There's going to be a slate. I'm going to challenge every incumbent Republican senator who's up for election this year." In North Carolina,
right.
I went in and did an event for Congressman Robert Pittenger, a strong supporter of President Trump, and because I supported Pittenger, Bannon announced that he was going to support his primary challenger. Well, now that primary challenger, Reverend Harris, is going to have to be asked, do you really want to continue to have the support of Steve Bannon?
Yeah.
So Bannon is effectively ended. Who's going to give him money? Nobody. Who's going to want to be his candidate? Nobody.
Yeah, there's the bottom line. No one's going to give him money. Meanwhile, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell praised the president's response. According to the Washington Post, McConnell told the president it was perfect. He would not change a word, while McConnell's reelection team tweeted out a simple message. Just this image of McConnell smiling. you love that, Jason.
I got a kick out of that. I thought there no words, no text, just a nice little gif of the Senate Majority Leader just smiling all the way.
Just smiling. And Carl, you have an op-ed in the Journal today as titled "A Fortune Teller's Reckoning in 2018," where you're looking back on your predictions from the past year. Make some new ones for 18, Carl.
Well, China will sign more trade deals next year than this year than the U.S. will. No U.S.-UK trade deal by the end of the year. ISIS will step up its large-scale attacks. Economic growth more than 3%. You want to read all of them to nearly 30 predictions for 2018. Pick up today's Wall Street Journal and turn to my standard position right underneath the great Dan Henninger on the lead-in page to the editorial section.
We got it, Carl. Thanks so much. Good to see you. Karl Rove.